Hey guys, and welcome to the in-depth analysis video of game number 3 of my best of 5 finals match from the 2024 Scrabble Players Championship against fellow Grandmaster Ian Weinstein. Both of the first 2 games were really interesting. I've covered those already in videos. Be sure to check those out if you haven't already. They both went Ian's way, so he took a 2-0 lead, meaning I would have to win 3 in a row in the afternoon to overtake him and win the title of North American Champion. I was definitely a little bit deflated after losing the first 2, but I also knew I was playing good Scrabble, so as I said at the end of yesterday's video, I went out to lunch with some of my friends, had a really good ham sandwich, and tried to be in as good a headspace as possible to mount my comeback in game 3. So here we go, let's see what happened. I was first this game with an opening rack of B, C, H, N, O, R, W. It's a bit of a clunky consonant-heavy rack, but I have some decent options. The standout plays here would be either Brown or Brooch. Brown scores 6 fewer points, getting me 26, but keeps the super synergistic CH leave for my next turn. Brooch gets me 32 points immediately, so 6 more than Brown, but keeps NW, which is a little bit awkward since the W is not a gray consonant. Brooch also takes a back E hook, which I don't have, and with 12 of them unseen, it's fairly likely Ian has one and could capitalize. So given all of those factors, I elected to play Brown, which computer analysis agrees with, and it just goes to show you how powerful a leave CH really is. So Ian with a terrible rack after my opening play of Brown. He's got 7 consonants, C, F, L, Q, R, S, W. He could try to play through this with something like Wolf or Flow through the only available vowel on the board for 18 points. But that still keeps 4 consonants, including the dreaded Q. So Ian made the call here to exchange tiles, keeping just RS on his rack. It's always painful to give up 18 points and score 0, but I think Ian makes the right call here. He's already in a weak position, at a bit of a deficit. He does have some nice tiles, including that S, so I think trading 5 here, going for a bingo on the next turn to get himself back in the game makes a lot of sense. This is exactly what I would have done if I were in the same position. I had an interesting draw here, pulling a pair of E's, which was certainly good, but also a pair of L's and a V, which is a little bit clunky. I have a lot of mediocre options here. I considered any number of plays ranging from bleak or belch from the B for 24, bevel from the B for 20, and clever to the R for 22. I also briefly considered clove for 18 through the O, but discarded this quickly as it takes a lot of backhooks. It takes an R, an N, and an S. I have none of them. Ian just traded 5. He's pretty likely to have one. I didn't want to do this. Another viable option I didn't actually see, but is worth considering, is my highest scoring option of chevre for 28 points through the R. This doesn't look great though because it keeps a pair of L's, which is not ideal. It also takes a back T hook in addition to the S hook, neither of which I have, and I generally try to avoid creating hooks I don't have, especially after my opponent trades a lot of tiles and has a bunch of chances to draw them, if at all possible. Bevel was an intriguing idea to keep the powerful CH combo together for another turn, but I was a little bit concerned that with the L now also in my rack, leaving 3 consonants and 0 vowels could lead to a vowel shortage on my rack the next turn, which I definitely didn't want. I strongly considered bleak or belch as well, as I mentioned before. I didn't love keeping the V. It's true that having the E and the L together, which go fairly synergistically with the V, does mitigate the downside of keeping the V a little bit. I was also a little bit worried about putting the C in a double-double line, since that's a really strong bingo line for Ian that would score a lot of points, and could prove annoying to block in the long run. So that's part of why I ended up going with clever. It's a very minor equity sacrifice. Belch and bleak and bevel are all about 1 point better on equity, but that's not a large difference, and this is certainly the most defensive, I think, both in the short term and the long term. It doesn't give Ian any double-double lines or any particularly scary bingo lines that didn't exist before, so I think this is reasonable. I'm okay with this choice. Ian had this rack, which doesn't make any 7s, however, it does make some 8s. 2 of them play on this board. One of them is from the C, Candors for 63, but Ian finds the better one, the very stylish Baudrons for 74 points, which, in case you're wondering, is a kind of cat. Also worth mentioning, this is what Scrabble players call a sticky S word. Baudron is not a word. It has to have the S at the end to be valid. So a really nice find by Ian here. However, it is a little bit dangerous because he puts an S between 2 triple word scores, and I just played off 5 tiles, so will I be able to capitalize? No, because I had a nightmare draw after clever, pulling now 7 consonants out of the bag. D, F, H, J, L, S, S. I certainly didn't have a good feeling seeing this come on my rack, and then, to make matters worse, Ian bingoing and opening a big spot I am powerless to block. The good news is, though, he did give me a couple of vowels to work with, the U and the O in Baudrons, and I have some decent options. I considered mainly 3 different plays. Sloyd, Through the O, a fairly strange looking word that would get rid of my J for 26, keeping FHS. Flush through the U, scoring one more point, 27, keeping the J on my rack, and also Josh, scoring yet one more point, 28, which does get rid of the J and the H, but keeps 4 consonants, D, F, L, S. There's another really interesting idea here that the commentators pointed out that I did not consider during the game. It's a big point sacrifice, playing Fjeld, another strange-looking word with the J in the middle for 16 points through the E in clever. It's a big point sacrifice, but the idea here is that I have 2 of the 3 remaining S's for Fjelds, and especially with the 4-point H, I have a good chance to draw a 50-plus point 5-letter word from the 8A square horizontally, hooking Fjelds on my next turn. Of the plays I considered, the first one I discarded was Josh, because I really didn't want to keep 4 consonants if I could keep 3, and risk running into more consonant trouble on my next turn. I waffled between Sloyd and Flush for a while. Sloyd is nice to get rid of the J, which is going to really threaten my bingo percentage the next couple of turns if I keep it, and now being at a slight deficit, it would be nice to get a bingo down sooner rather than later. Flush, on the other hand, keeps the J, which might be a good thing, because with the O and Baudrons right below a double word score and J-O being valid, I could easily threaten some 40-point overlap plays with it on my next turn. Eventually, though, I decided after Flush that Ian is pretty likely to play through the S in Baudrons on his next turn, just because he is going to be in a good position and want to block that spot. And that's probably, whether intentionally or not, going to block a lot of my overlap plays I'd be threatening above the O and Baudrons. So that would significantly diminish the utility of the J on the resulting board. That's part of why I decided to get rid of it now and go with Sloyd. Computer analysis does support my decision of Sloyd over Flush. However, the runaway best play appears to be the sacrifice setup of Fjeld. Really interesting to see. This, according to a Macondo simulation, wins 2 to 3% more often than playing Sloyd, which is a fairly sizable mistake. And it just goes to show you that maybe I was a little bit too impatient to go all out for a bingo. Because the intention with Fjeld is not really to bingo, it's to hit a big 50-point play with Fjelds. But even after that, the nice thing is, with 2 S's now, I'll still have another S on my rack, which will leave me in great position to bingo on subsequent turns. And I'm not really down all that much here, right? After Fjeld, I'll be down 10 points. If Ian scores a reasonable amount and I hit a big 50-point play with Fjelds on my next turn, I'll probably be back even, if not with a small lead. So maybe I was a little bit too impatient here and should have thought about craftier and more long-term options. I definitely see the benefit here, especially with only 1 S unseen. It's very unlikely Ian's going to have a good play in that spot or have a good way of blocking it. So maybe a missed opportunity here, very tough to see, but cool nonetheless. In any case, like I said, I went with Sloyd for 26, which is not a terrible option either, and let's see how that worked out. Ian drew very well after his bingo of Baudrons and bingoed immediately with Nyabates for 83 on this turn. There's nothing else to really consider here. He has other playable bingos like Obviates or Ice Boats, but these are all worse positionally and score significantly less on the scoreboard. Ian played this very quickly, as he should. In a timed game like this, under pressure, there is no reason to think for more than about 5 or 10 seconds on this kind of play. It's clearly your best bingo. Just put it down on the board, move on, and take an 83-point lead. So here I'm definitely feeling the pressure. Remember, I'm already down 2-0 in this series. If I lose this game, it is over. Ian wins the match. I have to win this game somehow. I'm already down 83 points. Ian has just bingoed twice in a row. And I didn't have the greatest draw after Sloyd, now FHMU on my rack. So this is a critical position here that I need to get right. And I made a play in this position that definitely raised some eyebrows from the commentators. I think it was a fairly clever play. I'm not sure it was my best play, but it certainly complicated the position. I ended up playing much through the C in clever for 24 points. The idea here is that I have the last S in the game. By bingoing with Nyabates, Ian has now played the third of the 4 S's, the 4th S is the one on my rack, and smutch is a word, so I set up potential big plays or bingos on the top row hitting one of the 2 triple word scores. The downside to much is twofold. Number one, I keep the F, which is not a great tile for either bingoing or scoring, it's kind of inflexible. Number two, Ian will probably see what I'm up to and might be able to block it on his next turn. I was aware that he'll probably try to block sooner or later, but I also figured it's not actually that easy to block. Because if he plays either to the left or the right of much, again, I know there are no S's left, so unless Ian wants to spend a blank for smutch, which he's probably not going to want to do, he's not going to be able to play above much on the top row and score. So if he plays to the left or right of much, he's probably going to be giving me some counterplay either down the A column or on the 1 row respectively. So it's kind of annoying to block, which I felt worked in my favor. So definitely an interesting decision here. I missed another very strong option though of Bump from the B and Niabates for 22 points. This is significantly better on equity because while it does score 2 fewer points than Much, EHST is a much stronger leave than EFS that's better for both scoring and bingoing. This also creates another S-hook in Bumps that could be very useful for me going forward, in addition to the one that I already have with Browns. To be honest, if I had seen Bump, I think I would have gone for it. The Much to Smudge setup is really nice, but it is, as we'll see, still blockable, and EFS is just so much weaker than EHST. Bump, like I said, creates another S-hook, still ensures a wide open board. It also sets up my H for HM plays if I'm unable to bingo on my next turn as a backup play. So I think this would have been a little bit better, but I didn't see it during the game, and I think Much still has a lot of merit. For what it's worth, the Macondo engine is definitely not a fan of Much. It strongly prefers Bump. I think, once again, just because the H-T combo is so much better than the F. So a little bit of a misjudgment on my part here, playing Much, it would seem. But, like I said, depending on what Ian has, it may be challenging for him to block. In this position, he decided to just take his highest scoring play of Allowed through the Ellen Clever for 25 points, which scores pretty well considering how clunky his rack is, and also gets rid of a bunch of his vowels. I think this is the right call just because it's so difficult for him to block Much. Like I was saying before, if he tries to play on the right side of Much, let's say with something like Mud, he's not only going to be sacrificing a ton of equity, but he'll still be giving me counterplay above the D on the top row, so this would not be a very effective play. And if he tries to do something on the left, let's say LO for instance, then he gives me huge threats down the A column. So Ian correctly recognizing here, I think, that trying to block Much is probably going to just give back an even more dangerous opportunity. He should just take his points and run with it. 25 is a lot, like I said, for a rack with an A, 2 U's, an O, and an E. This, I think, is absolutely the right call on his part. I drew the Z out of the bag, which I wasn't particularly happy to see because I really wanted to bingo being down over 80 points, and the Z, as great a scoring tile as it is definitely not great for bingoing. So in this position, I definitely was fixated on getting rid of the Z. I have 2 good ways to do that, both of which are also effective at opening more space on the board, which I want given my deficit. I looked at Ooze for 33 from the O and Niabates, or Fees for 37 through the E and Niabates. Fees is nice to get rid of the troublesome F and also score 4 more points, but it also does get rid of both E's, which is not ideal. IOS is a bit clunky, especially with 7 more I's still in the pool. I was a little bit worried about having too many I's on my rack. Fees also could allow Ian to play next to the E with a 5-letter word reaching the bottom right triple word score, which would both score a lot of points and take out my Fees' hook very effectively, so I was worried that wouldn't stay open in the long run. That's part of why I eventually chose Ooze, because with only 1 D left and no other hooks available, it was fairly unlikely Ian was going to be able to hook Ooze himself and block, and parallel blocks down the K column now, unlike blocks after Fees down the O column, will not score nearly as much, and will also give me a lot of counterplay along the 15 row, so it felt a little bit harder for Ian to deal with. Another interesting option pointed out by the commentators that I didn't consider was actually holding the Z for another play, likely with Fiad for 24 points to the D and Allowed. It's a significant point sacrifice, 9 points less than Ooze, but it keeps the Z, which is probably a worse bingo tile than the F, but a much better scoring tile. The idea here is that I might not be very likely to bingo next turn, but hopefully I can get something big with Smutch, such as Zest, if I draw one of the 4 remaining T's and claw my way back that way. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this. I think it's a bit too overly patient since I'm down 84 points, and to me, bingoing is going to be the best way for me to get back into this game, not getting a 50-point Z play and then hoping for a bingo after that. So I personally prefer Ooze here. Interestingly, the Macondo engine has all of these plays virtually neck and neck within a fraction of a percentage. All of Ooze, Fees, and Fiad all sim roughly 20% to win, plus or minus somewhere around a 10th or a 20th of a percent. So the computer cannot decide between these 3 plays. All of them have very different pros and cons. I think it's close. I personally, like I said, still prefer getting rid of the Z and going for a bingo, given I am still down 84 points, which is fairly significant. Ian, fortunately for me, drew a fairly clunky rack after his nice dump of Allowed on the previous turn. KUV, not a combo you ever really want to see on the same rack. But he finds a really nice play here of Klutz for 28 points to the Z and Ooze. Not a word you see on a Scrabble board very often with a K, U, and Z in it, but it looks like his best play here by a good margin. It stops double doubles through the E and Ooze, which could be potentially very dangerous. Keeps EIV, which isn't the best leave ever, but certainly could be a lot worse. I think this is a great decision here by Ian. I drew NAP to my leave of EFIS, and I'm close to some 8-letter words here, such as lifespan or pan fries, but unfortunately I don't have the tiles I need on this board. I figured here I needed to get rid of my F now and really focus on trying to go all out for a bingo on my next turn. And I also wanted to try to keep opening as much space as possible, because being down 80 points, even if I do manage to get one bingo, I may still be trailing a little bit, and I want to keep this board as dynamic as possible in the long run. So to that end, I played Find for 24 points to the D and allowed. And I'm not really thinking I'm going to hit that F on my next turn. FP is a terrible 2-tile combination for bingos, so I'm fairly unlikely to hit an 8-letter word starting with that F. But Ian doesn't know that. He doesn't know I'm keeping a P, and either now or a couple turns from now, he may be worried about that F because I could potentially score a large number of points if I do hit an 8-letter word starting with it all the way to the bottom left triple, and that may induce him to sacrifice a lot of points to block it. And then I still have smudge to work with, I still have oozes, I still have the S in Niobate and the S in Sloyd. I have a lot of different places to bingo here, in a lot of different areas of the board. It's basically impossible for Ian to block all of them effectively in one turn, even in a couple of turns. That's exactly what I want, and that's exactly what you need when you're trying to come back from a significant deficit like this against a very skilled opponent. I think this is a good play. Ian picks up some more junk, Q, V, X, and duplicated E's and I's on his rack, and he makes a really smart play here. He'd love to get rid of his Q immediately, since it's the worst tile on his rack, and he can do that pretty well with Chi and Key for 28 points, keeping E, E, I, V, X. But he makes a great call here, holding his Q for one more turn, taking 43 points with Vex. And the reason this play is best is not just because it's 15 more points immediately. It's because he now finally takes out that smudge hook. After a play like Much, Ian should definitely assume I have the last S, otherwise it doesn't really make a lot of sense as a play. This is a great way to take it out because it gives back absolutely nothing. No 2-letter words with the V, so I can't even overlap on the top left for a lot of points. There aren't any words that go blank, V, S, blank that I might be able to play through the V for a freak triple-triple. This is a fantastic defensive play, and what's great for Ian is that he holds Chi for his next turn. If somehow his spot under Klutz gets blocked, he can still play it next to the S in Sloyd, either on the right for 26, or on the left for 23 if he so chooses. So a very heads-up play by Ian here, not so much grabbing the points, once again, playing immediate defense here, forestalling the less urgent task of getting rid of the Q for one more turn, and prioritizing the more urgent task of taking out possible 100-point threats with Smudge. Very well played here by Ian. And thankfully for me, I finally got a much-needed bingo on my next turn. My first really straightforward turn of the game. I have a single playable bingo here. It's the 7-letter word of Paisani for 84 points. I played this within a couple of seconds. Thrilled to get back within a couple of points of Ian, and also thrilled to have an easy play as I was getting a bit low on the clock by this point. Now, it's great that I bingoed, but I'm still down 14 points. Thankfully for me, though, Ian still has the Q to deal with, and now, and only now, he gets rid of it, playing Chi for 28 points. This looks correct. He could consider a more defensive placement, such as the 26 or 23-point ones I mentioned before, to take out the S in Sloyd, which is a good bingo line. But I think he's right to take the points here, because he's now not up that much. He needs to be careful about sacrificing too much for defense, because I certainly could still catch him without bingoing. And there's also so many places on this board to still bingo. Again, in large part thanks to my proactivity early on with plays like Find and Much, and also Sloyd to blow this board open. If he blocks the S in Sloyd, he still has to worry about now 7s under Paisani, 8s from the F in Find, 8s from the S in Niobate, and maybe a couple of other marginal lanes as well. So there's still so many threats on this board, I think it makes sense for him to just go with as many points as possible, figure I'm probably going to get another bingo at some point. He's not going to be able to stop me entirely, so he wants to just pad his score as much as possible and try to outrun me. I think this is the correct logic here for Ian. However, guys, it turns out that there is an astonishingly clever opportunity for Ian in this position that we both missed over the board, and I missed when I was initially making this video. I know this is a little out of place, but I wanted to add it back. It was pointed out in the comment section on Will Anderson's video he posted this past weekend on this series. And the astonishingly clever play is to not play the Q immediately, but to play Elamai from the E in Oozes with 3 overlaps for 24 points, keeping QI along with an E on the rack. The idea here is that Ian now threatens QI above the I in Elamai, landing the Q on the triple letter score both ways for 62 points. And that is, of course, a lot more than getting 28 immediately for QI and KI as he did during the game. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, isn't it going to be obvious to me as his opponent what he's doing? Well, maybe, but not necessarily. Elamai scores enough points that I could just be thinking maybe he's got too many I's and E's and he's trying to dump. And even if it is obvious to me, it's not that easy to block. I'm probably going to have to play a 2 or maybe 3-letter word in the same spot and not get all that many points. Plus, if I do block, it's not that big a deal for Ian because he can always, as a fallback, just play Chi and Ki in the spot he initially played it. So there's so much upside to this play, trying to get 62 instead of just 28 for the Q. That's a huge difference. And there's not that much downside. Like I said, there's no X out even for Xi. He's not giving back all that much. And if I end up blocking, like I said, it's not a big deal because he can just go back to the other placement. So this would have been a really cool opportunity for Ian in this position. Like I said, he missed it, I missed it, and I still missed it when I was making this video initially. This is getting added back later. So pretty crazy stuff here. This is Nigel Richards level play finding here. Really, really hard to see. No way would I have found this over the board either, but just felt obligated to point it out to you guys. In any case, like I said, Ian played Chi for 28 points, which if you're not Nigel Richards, I think is a very reasonable play in this position. And thankfully for me, I got a very good draw after Paisani, pulling the blank out of the bag. I have a number of available bingos here, and I played my highest scoring one, Faggoted, for 78 points. Now, if you're new to the tournament Scrabble scene, this bingo may raise some eyebrows, as the root word here is an offensive word. The reason that this word and its inflections were not removed from the Scrabble dictionary a couple of years ago, along with a lot of other slurs and offensive words, is that faggot actually has a non-offensive meaning. It can be a verb meaning to bundle sticks together. Now, of course, that is not the meaning you often hear it associated with, especially in modern parlance. But in general, Scrabble words that have non-offensive meanings, even if they're not the most common meanings, were allowed to remain in the dictionary. So just wanted to clear that up in case anybody was wondering. There was certainly no offense whatsoever intended with this play, but it does have a non-offensive meaning, which is why it's a valid word. In any case, it was a word that scored 78 points for me and propelled me back to the lead for the first time in a while this game, 317 to 281. And thankfully for me, Ian once again was struggling with some imbalance on his rack, holding 3 E's. But he found a really nice play in this position, scoring 32 points, by far the most he can get, with Bay hooking the Y onto Klutz to make Klutzy, getting all those points once again for the K and the Z. This is 32 and looks to be his best play by a significant margin. And he cuts his deficit to 4. Now, I got another much-needed stroke of luck, pulling the second blank after bingoing with the first blank. I have a lot of available bingos here that score over 80 points. I can score 89 with Shingler, but this is not what I did. The biggest reason I didn't do this is I admittedly wasn't 100% sure this was valid. I was pretty sure it was good, and I knew shingle was a verb, but I wasn't 100% sure shingler as a noun, as in somebody who shingles, was a word. So instead, I decided to sacrifice 3 points to play sphering, which I was 100% certain was a word. Another advantage of sphering over shingler is the G is a less dangerous tile to give back to Ian to bingo to than the R. After sphering, if Ian doesn't have IN on his rack to end ING, it's going to be virtually impossible for him to bingo on the 15 row to that G. There are so few long words that end in G's that don't end in the ING suffix. And you'll notice that there is only one N unseen in the pool, so the odds that Ian has it are fairly slim. If I play shingler, on the other hand, there are a lot of 8-letter words that end in an R, especially with lots of E's and I's for ER or IER available. Also, potentially ending in OR with one of the 2 unseen O's is a possibility. So, sphering, like I said, it seemed like the more prudent play given the circumstances that I was unsure of shingler, and it also could give back less counterplay. If I were 100% sure that shingler was a word, would I have played it? Possibly. I think it would have been a little bit closer. But the 3-point sacrifice for sphering still feels reasonable to me, given the relative lack of ends still in the pool. In any case, this is what I went with, and it gave me a 90-point lead, my biggest lead of the game so far, and actually my biggest lead of any game in the series so far. So a couple turns ago, I was down about 100 points, and feeling pretty dejected about my chances, not just in this game, but also in the series once again, being down 2-0. And just like that, 3 bingos in a row, I'm up 90 points, and all of a sudden feeling like, okay, I'm in pretty good shape this game. Let's close this out. Let's get to 2-1, and then I still have to win 2 more games, but at least if I can escape this one, that would be a big relief. So that just goes to show you guys, you never want to give up in this game, especially when there's 2 blanks and multiple S's unseen. A lot can still happen if you can manage to have your opponent dodge the good stuff and draw stuff like the Q and a bunch of E's and I's, and you get a couple of decent draws out of the bag. The game can swing just like that in the span of a couple of turns. I go from about 20% to win to now being nearly 95% to win. So a massive swing, but Ian is certainly not going to give up. He's shown throughout this whole tournament and this whole match why he is such a great player, and even though he is down 90 and just faced 3 bingos in a row, he's going to do his very best to steal this game back from me and try to win the title in 3 without having to go to a Game 4 or Game 5. He's in a tough spot though. He has EEIILMN, no available bingos here, and his highest scoring play is Miney through the Iron Find for 30 points. This is what he ended up doing, and he took a while to play it reluctantly because it gets rid of his N. And as I mentioned before, this is the last N unseen, and Ian would really love to keep the IN combo together to try to hit a high-scoring ING bingo on the bottom. So because of that, I was actually very happy to see this play come down, even though it scored 30 points. The problem is, Ian just really doesn't have a lot of good plays that hold on to his N. His next highest scoring play is Lemon for 27 under Faggoted, but the problem with this is that if I have one of the two T's for Pent, it's pretty easy for me to play under there, both blocking and scoring effectively, and even if I don't, I can probably often play something to the N and Sphering, which will effectively block everything on the bottom row and should seal up the win for me. So this doesn't look super promising either. Another option that I know Ian strongly considered is Lay for 18 points in the bottom left corner. This keeps the IN combo together and also creates another line for 7s on the 15 row with something like Aim or Aim. The problem is Ian only scores 18 points here, so he gives up a significant amount over 27 for Lemon or 30 for Miney. And in a lot of cases, I'm going to be able to just underlap Lay for 30 plus points. And then at that point, I'll be taking a 100 plus point lead, so even an ING bingo for Ian might not be enough in the endgame. Another interesting idea is Life, even fewer points, 14, but if Ian can draw one of the 3 remaining R's for Lifer, he might get a big bingo down there. The problem is, there are 3 R's for Lifer, and after just turning over 7 tiles, the odds that I have none of them are pretty slim. And even if I don't, I could probably play a 2-letter word in the bottom left corner, like WO or something, next to the E in Life, obstructing that spot and still holding on to a nearly 100-point lead. So really not a lot of great options for Ian here that seem to give him any realistic chance of winning the game. I'm not even sure what I would do here, honestly. I think his play is not unreasonable, but it's really hard to imagine him winning after getting rid of his N, because then he won't be able to hit that G. So I don't really know what to do here. The computer seems to slightly prefer Lay on the bottom left, but it still only gives Ian about a 3% chance to win the game even after Lay. For what it's worth, his actual play of Miney sims at winning just over 2%. So either way, things are looking extremely bleak for Ian. These positions are so hard, when you're down 90 points, you're just grasping at straws to try to give yourself the best outside shot. It's so hard to evaluate this. I really can't fault him for taking the points, because like I said, if you score only 18 here, you're just so worried that your opponent scores 30, and even if you hit a 90-point bingo, you're still down a tempo in the endgame, you're probably losing. There is just really no good option here for Ian. But in any case, like I said, he played Miney for 30, and I faced a rack of ADOOTWY. Like I said, I was a bit relieved to see Miney come down, because now I knew I didn't have to worry about any bingos to the G in Sphering. But I also knew that that got Ian to within 60 points, and if I didn't score enough points here, he could potentially still beat me with a bingo. So I wanted to make sure to score here in addition to being defensive. I need to be a bit careful about a play like Woodsy through the S for 30, which is my highest equity play, because that could give high-scoring bingos on the top, such as Cigarette, which is nearly 100 points, and Ian could conceivably win in the endgame depending on what I draw. So instead, I looked at a couple other options, both of which consisted of playing off the letters YOW. I looked at Yows for 30 on the top right, and also Yow for 28 under Faggoted. It's worth mentioning that Yow under Faggoted carries no risk because there are no S's left for Ian to hook pews. OY doesn't take any back hooks, so I am giving back nothing on the bottom. The drawback with this Yow is it leaves the S in Sloyd open. This Yows does leave the S in Sloyd open, but the key is Ian would now have to end in the S, and if he does that, he's going to be scoring a lot less than potential bingos after this Yow, because here he could play something like Grapiest, getting not only the triple letter but also the double word, which is going to score a lot more than the bingo not occupying the double word. I figured after Yows to the S in Baudrons, if Ian bingos for like 60 or 70 to the S in Sloyd, I'm still going to be up 20 points and a tempo going into this endgame. I should be able to hold on easily. Now, my one concern after Yows to the S in Baudrons, though, was a freak overlap bingo on row 14 under the letters in Faggoted. Specifically, what I was worried about was if Ian had to rack ACEILPR, he could play Caliper for over 100 points, and that might, depending on what's left, be enough for him to win the game. So that was one reason why I gravitated a little bit towards this play at first. But then I was a little bit concerned depending on what I drew out of the bag, that if Ian did hit something like Grapiest, it would be a nearly tie game, and then maybe, just maybe, if he was threatening multiple outs, he might be able to eke it out in the endgame. With so many tiles in the bag and so many possibilities, it was difficult, if not impossible, for me to know for sure that there was no way Ian could bingo through the S after this Yao and still be able to outrun me. So because of that, I eventually settled on playing Yaos to the S and Vajrons for 30, figuring if he doesn't have Caliper immediately, I'm going to win this game. And if he has it, he has it, but it's super, super unlikely. It's like one possible draw out of several thousand, given there are still 7 tiles left in the bag. According to Macondo, I made a mistake here. While Yaos is not a bad play, winning over 99% of the time, there are some circumstances in which it loses, like I said, if Ian plays Caliper and draws the right tiles. Apparently, a play that seems to basically never lose is not Yao on the bottom, but Woody down here scoring 26. Once again, there's no danger of Ian hooking pews and bingoing because there are no S's unseen. And apparently, getting rid of more tiles gives me more of a guarantee in the endgame that if Ian does bingo with something like Grapiest through that S, that I'll be able to outrun him. Now, I'm not going to try to prove that by permuting every possible bingo Ian could have through the S after Woody, and every possible endgame for every possible resulting draw I could have. That would probably take several hours. So I'll take Macondo's word for it that Woody is a better play. Now, that being said, is Yao's likely to be a fatal mistake? No. Like I said, it still loses under 1% of the time, and I'm not seeing any situations other than some cases after Caliper for Ian where this is going to lose. That being said, you never know in this game. It's always important to play precisely, and you can't deny that even though this is not a mistake that's likely to cost me the game, it is still a mistake. And that is why, ultimately, I think if engines like Macondo keep improving, they are going to be better than humans at Scrabble. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, no human has the capacity to look at this play of Woody, look at every single possible draw with 7 tiles in the bag, and every single possible endgame after every single possible bingo Ian could have through the S, and be like, yeah, I am winning every single time. It's just not humanly possible, but a computer can do that. And in any given game, it's highly unlikely that 99.1% to win and 99.9% to win will make a difference. But over enough games, enough time, that can start to make a difference, and like I said, as small as the margin is, that's why I think if these engines can keep improving and keep refining a couple of weaknesses here and there, they will eventually be consistently better than humans at Scrabble. Macondo may already be better than all humans at Scrabble. It's hard to know for sure, but I think at some point, if hopefully it keeps improving, it will undeniably get to that place, which is very exciting. In any case, back to the game. Like I said, I played Yaos, and fortunately for me, Ian did not have Caliper. At this point, there's really not a lot he can try here. The problem is, any bingo he hits to the S and Sloyd is not going to be enough to win. He's down 90 points, and such bingos are going to score probably in the 60s, at most in the low 70s. So he needs to bingo for a lot more. He can't hit the G in Sphering because there are no Ns left to draw for ING bingos. So he makes, I think, a reasonable effort playing Jib for 16 under the AGO, trying to create a high-scoring line to the triple word score under Op. The problem is there are so many hooks to Op left in the pool, including the 2 A's and the 2 T's, that it's virtually impossible I'm not going to have a decent play there that scores pretty well in blocks. So in practice, I don't really see this working. That being said, there's no downside to trying this. Like we've talked about, spread doesn't really matter, so even if I manage to bingo there or score a lot and Ian loses by close to 200 instead of 100, he doesn't really care about that. So you might as well try. Maybe I'll make a mistake. Maybe I'll make an inadequate block. You might as well give me the chance to mess up. For what it's worth, the computer doesn't seem to find anything that fares well against good play from the opponent. One interesting idea it does come up with is Guy for 13 points on the bottom right, which I presume has the idea of going for a CE draw for that massive Caliper play I was just mentioning. It says that this wins about 2% of the time. However, I think it's less than that in practice, because even if Ian draws the CE, if I'm aware of this possibility, which like I said I was, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to block that. Because if I block that adequately, then Ian's only place to bingo is going to be to the S and Sloyd, and I'll still be up 90 points and should be able to narrowly withstand such bingos to the S even if they are out bingos. So it's an interesting idea. Maybe it fares a little bit better than Ian's try of Jip. I'm not sure. I think I would have been able to refute this pretty comfortably. But it's an interesting way to possibly steal the game against an opponent who's not fully aware of all of those threats. I could see some people just blindly blocking the S, thinking there are no bingo lines after this, and then getting shocked with a 100-plus point out bingo of 6 overlap Caliper. That would be a heck of a way to steal this game. Do I think it would have worked here? Like I said, I don't think so, but it's worth looking at. In any case, not much to do for Ian here. Like I said, he plays Jip. All I need to do is block on the bottom. Actually, I don't even really need to block. There are 3 R's unseen and no possible bingos for Ian. In any case, just in case I somehow mistracked, I played Iodate for 25, giving nothing back and making sure I would go out on my next turn with an A and whatever I might have drawn out of the bag. Ian with 3 R's doesn't have any great plays. He plays Rat for 14 under the A and Ian Paisani. He has a couple of better endgame plays like Ratlin over here, but like I said, it doesn't really matter. And I actually make a suboptimal endgame play myself, missing Ace for 12. I go out with Vac for 10. You know, a little bit careless, but like I said, doesn't really matter in this format. Just needed the win here to stay alive, and I got it. 476 to 373 in my favor. The final score, a big 103-point win. Much needed to stay alive in this match. It is now 2-1 in Ian's favor as we head into game number 4. Another really suspenseful game here. Like I said, I was once again on the brink of defeat, down about 100 points earlier in the game. Managed to make some good plays to keep the board open and dynamic, and luck into 3 consecutive bingos of Paisani, Faggoted, and Sphering. Definitely some luck there, but I will take it. I certainly needed it desperately to stay alive. I think Ian played a great game here too. It's tough to fight back after your opponent bingos 3 times with multiple S's and both blanks, and I think he gave himself just about the best shot he could have. So another really, really well-played game of Scrabble on both sides, as we've been seeing from both of us all series, and yeah, I was definitely relieved after winning this game. It was a much-needed confidence boost after losing the first 2. That being said, I knew I still had an uphill battle. Ian was still up 2-1 in the series, and I would need to beat him 2 more games in a row if I wanted to complete the comeback and win this title. So, good news in this game, but a lot of work still to do. Would I be able to win Game 4 and force a decisive Game 5? You will all find out tomorrow when I do the deep dive analysis of our Game 4. So, thank you all so much for your support of my channel and of this series. I really appreciate it. As always, let me know what you think of this game in the comment section. And I look forward to seeing you all once again tomorrow for the analysis of game number 4. Another must-win for me, as I am still going to be trailing 1-2 in this series. Can I do it? You'll find out. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.